God used to dwell in a house among his people, but now he has a home that's better than the first. It doesn't look like a building with a steeple. Now he's living in the people of the church. Brick after brick, God is building his temple. Brick after brick, he's making it strong. With Christ the sure foundation and his people as the stones, he is building a place he can live. Brick after brick.
Well, good morning, church. We are happy to be in the house of prayer once again. We're thankful to God for all of his goodness and his mercy. We want to share a thought with you this morning. We're going to be taking our assignment from the Gospel of Matthew, the 11th chapter. And I'm going to be reading from the New King James Version. And there you'll find these words recorded. Now it came to pass, when Jesus finished commanding his 12 disciples, that he departed from there to teach and to preach in their cities. And when John the Baptist had heard in prison about the works of Christ, he sent 2 of his disciples and said to him, "Are you the coming one, or do we look for another?" Jesus answered and said to them, "Go and tell John the things which you hear and see. The blind see, and the lame walk. The lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear. The dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached to them. And blessed is he who is not offended because of me." As they departed, Jesus began to say to the multitudes concerning John, "What did you go out into the wilderness to see? A reed shaken by the wind? But what did you go out to see? A man clothed in soft garments? Indeed, those who wear soft clothing are in kings' houses. But what did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes, I say to you, and more than a prophet. For this is he of whom it is written, 'Behold, I send my messenger before your face, who will prepare your way before you.' Assuredly, I say to you, among those born of women, there has not risen one greater than John the Baptist. But he who is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. And from the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven suffers violence, and the violent take it by force. For all the prophets and the law prophesied until John. And if you are willing to receive it, he is Elijah who is to come. He who has ears to hear, let him hear." From verse 3, "And he said to him, 'Are you the coming one, or do we look for another?' Jesus answered and said to them, 'Go and tell John the things which you hear and see. The blind see, and the lame walk. The lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear. The dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached to them. And blessed is he who is not offended because of me.'" I want to speak this morning from the subject, when God disappoints. When God disappoints. Here in this episode, we find Jesus speaking about a well-known character of the Bible, John the Baptist. John the Baptist is a fascinating character of the New Testament. He is, of course, the one who baptized Jesus. And in doing so, he is the one that launched the ministry of Jesus Christ. John the Baptist is mentioned in all 4 Gospels. What's interesting is that in those Gospels, it's only the Gospel of Matthew and Luke that speak about Jesus in his early years. It's in those Gospels that we have the birth narratives that speak about the birth of Jesus Christ. And in Luke, we have a glimpse of Jesus as a young boy in the temple. What it goes to show is that you can tell the story of Jesus without the birth of Jesus, without the early life of Jesus. But you can't tell the story of Jesus without John the Baptist. He is the beginning of Jesus' ministry. He's the starting point of our Gospels. It was John the Baptist who was the first to recognize Jesus as the Messiah. The next day, John saw Jesus coming toward him and said, "Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." Not only did John recognize Jesus as the Messiah in the beginning of his ministry, John actually recognized the Messiah before he was born. We read the story of Mary and Elizabeth, the mother of John the Baptist. And it happened when Elizabeth heard the greeting of Mary, the babe leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. Even in his mother's womb, he recognized Jesus, the Messiah. So with all of that, it seems somewhat strange, contradictory, and maybe even disturbing that John would ask the question, "Are you the coming one, or do we look for another?" It's not a question that we would expect from John the Baptist, who recognized him before he was born, the first to recognize and announce that this is the one we've been waiting for. And it's because of this that it says John is having a moment of doubt. John is doubting whether or not Jesus is in fact the Messiah that he spoke of. I, through the years, have always heard that even John the Baptist, like so many of us, had come to a place where he doubted who Jesus was. I've disagreed with that position. I do not believe that John is displaying doubt and unbelief here. First off, because there's nowhere in the text that he is accused of doubting. What it says, "Blessed is he who is not offended because of me." So it doesn't say that he's doubting. Furthermore, Jesus is never sympathetic toward doubting. We never read where Jesus understands and makes allowance for unbelief. time and time again in the scriptures. For instance, when he and his disciples were out at sea, caught in a storm, Jesus is fast asleep. And they begin crying out to him, "Save us, we're going to die." But he said to them, "Why are you fearful, O you of little faith?" Then he arose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. Jesus rebukes doubt and unbelief. We read it again. This time Jesus is not there and walks on the water to meet them. We all know the story where Peter bids to come out to meet him. Jesus tells him to come, and now Peter is walking on the water. But because he succumbs to doubt, he begins to sink. And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him and said to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And again, you don't see Jesus saying, "I know this was tough, Peter. Storms can be scary. I know it seemed like you were going to drown." You see, none of that. "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" Over and over we see this. Another story when the disciples tried to cast out a demon from an afflicted boy, something that they had done before, yet were not able to cast him out. The father pleads with Jesus, who of course rebukes the demon and heals the boy. In the confusion of the disciples, they asked the question. Then his disciples came to Jesus privately and said, "Why could we not cast it out?" And the answer came clearly. So Jesus said to them, "Because of your unbelief." Again, nothing there about, well, you know, Satan is a scary guy. Satan is a powerful demon. No, it's a rebuke. You should have been able to do this, but because of your unbelief, you failed. And of course, there is that famous story of Thomas, known to us as Doubting Thomas, who says, "Unless I see it with my own eyes, touch it and feel it, I will not believe." Jesus accommodates him. Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." Then Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." So Jesus is never sympathetic toward unbelief. He never makes excuses for failing to believe. In fact, the scriptures say, "And without faith, it is impossible to please God." Because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. Yet when we look in our study here, Jesus does not rebuke him for doubting. In fact, applauds him. "Surely I say to you, among those born of women, there has not risen one greater than John the Baptist." Hardly something that you would say about someone who was given into doubt and unbelief. So what is happening here? What is our text telling us? Again, Jesus answered and said to them, "Go and tell John the things which you hear and see. The blind see, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear. The dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached to them. And blessed is he who is not offended because of me. Now, in that list that Jesus presents to them, he is actually citing two passages from the Old Testament, two prophecies. One found in Isaiah 35, where it speaks of what the Messiah would do when he came. Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, and the ears of the deaf shall be unstopped. Then the lame shall leap like a deer, and the tongue of the dumb sing. For the waters shall burst forth in the wilderness and streams in the desert. He also alludes to a passage in Isaiah 61, again speaking of the Messiah. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to preach good tidings to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound. Now, when we take these passages and we line them up, we start to see the exact parallels that Jesus lays out. Tell John the blind see. There from Isaiah 35, that the eyes of the blind shall be opened. Jesus says, the lame walk. Again, Isaiah 35, then the lame shall leap like a deer. He adds one as a bonus. The lepers are cleansed. And then the deaf hear. Isaiah 35, the ears of the deaf shall be unstopped. Adds another bonus, the dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached to them. Over in Isaiah 61, the Lord has anointed me to preach good tidings to the poor. So all of the things in his list are here paralleled in these Old Testament prophecies. It's not an exhausted list. Jesus, as he stated, adds a couple of things on top of it. Lepers are cleansed and the dead are raised up. But it's not so much what Jesus adds. It's what he leaves out, what he does not include in that list. We find it in Isaiah 61. To proclaim liberty to the captives and the opening of the prison to those who are bound. Jesus does not include that. Why is that significant? Because where is John the Baptist at this time? He is in prison. And not only is he in prison on death row, but he will never see freedom from this imprisonment, as he will then be beheaded. So what he says sends back the message. See these things, but know, John, it won't include you being set free. So what is John's concern here? It is not who Jesus is. We read it carefully. When John heard in prison about the works of Christ, he sent two of his disciples and said to him, "Are you the coming one, or do we look for another?" His question was about the works of Christ, not the person of Christ. John didn't doubt who Jesus was. John didn't understand what Jesus was doing. And that is so much like us today. We've been in situations where we know who God is. We don't doubt who Jesus is. We don't doubt his existence. We don't doubt his love. But we don't understand why we are in certain circumstances. Lord, I believe who you are, but why is there so much trouble in my marriage? Why does that never get any better? Lord, I know you love us, but why did my child have to be struck down by a drunk driver? Why did I have to go through that? Why am I in an abusive relationship? Lord, I know you're there. I know you love me, but why did I get that negative doctor's report? Why do I have to live a life of loneliness and isolation? Sometimes we find ourselves believing in God, but not understanding why He allows certain things in our life. And what do we do when we find ourselves in those circumstances? We are exhorted to trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct your paths. Trusting God when things go wrong. Trusting God when things make no sense. We find that in the life of Job. With all that he was going through and trying to understand, brought him to a place where he says, though he slay me, yet I will trust him. I don't know why he's doing it. I don't have the answers. But I'm going to trust him anyhow. Faith is believing when the evidence seems to be absent. But trust is believing when the evidence seems to be against you. When it seems like God has turned his back on you. When it seems like your prayers are just not being answered. When we find ourselves in those kinds of situations, like John, trying to understand, why aren't you there? Why aren't you responding? Why aren't you answering my prayer? Sometimes the only thing we can do is to be still and know that I am God. Sometimes there's no easy answers, and sometimes we just have to stand on that we know all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. You're going to find yourself at times when all you can do is hang on by a thread of faith. You don't have the answers, and I can't give you the answers on why God seems to be allowing this to happen to you. Why can't my situation change? Why can't I get a different result? Why can't my prayers be answered like I need them to be? We all are going to find ourselves in those kinds of life situations. Some of us may be there now. Some of us may have been there for some time now, waiting for some clarity, waiting for some change, waiting for a different result. And sometimes we find ourselves being disappointed by God, that he's not giving me what I'm hoping for. He's not giving me what I'm asking for. But in those times, we can lean on God and know that he will never leave us or forsake us. He may seem far and seem like he's not hearing us. It may seem like our prayers are going unanswered, hanging on the ceilings. It may seem like nothing's ever going to change. But yet it's in those times that he'll give us strength and say, I'm standing in trusting God. I'm standing on Jesus Christ, the solid rock. I'm knowing and believing that he's always there. If you love the Lord, give him a praise.
Brick after brick, God is building his temple. Brick after brick, he is making it strong. With Christ the sure foundation and his people as the stones, he is building a place he can live. Brick after brick,